Have you ever started building a SaaS application just to then realize that you need to support multiple organizations? Yeah, that's the moment when you discover something called multi-tenancy. And if you have ever looked at one of those architecture diagrams, then your reaction was probably something like, "Oh hell no!" But don't worry, in this video I'm going to show you how to implement proper multi-tenant architecture in just 3 steps. First of all, we will break down what multi-tenancy actually is, how it works, and how it compares to a traditional setup. Then we will design a clean entity relationship diagram so that you can finally understand how your users, organizations, and other tables fit together. And finally, we will take everything we've learned and we will create a multi-tenant application, complete with auth, org switching, RBAC, and all the essentials for a real SaaS product. So now let's dive into it. Let's start by first of all defining what we are going to even build. So I want to create an internal blog application where different entities, primarily companies, can sign up to create, manage, and publish their own blog articles. So normal individuals like me and you can still sign up and use the application. Nevertheless, the target audience is companies. So if a company like, for example, Amazon signs up, it will also onboard its employees. Let's call them members. And the thing is, not every member is the same. A few members will be admins, pretty much managers, and the rest will be normal members with the role user. And the thing is, in my application, only admins of these entities should be able to create the blog articles. Normal members with the role user should only be able to comment on the blog articles and view the blog articles, which are directly linked to the entity. Now, if this confuses you, don't worry, let me show you a demo of what we are going to build in this video. So as you see, I'm currently signed in, and I'm signed in as an individual user, Jan Marshall. But the interesting thing is that I'm also signed into an organization, Amazon. And the thing is, this Amazon organization has 2 blog articles, and that's why I can see them right here. And if I now switch into the Google organization, you will see that I don't see these articles anymore. And that's because these articles are linked to the organization. I can only see the blog articles which are currently or which have been created by the organization itself. So if I'm in the Google organization, I don't see blog articles from the Amazon organization. And also, since I'm an admin of this organization, I can also create a blog article. And the interesting thing is also that this is one application, localhost 3000. We have one server and one database, not multiple databases per user or tenant or multiple applications. No, it's one resource which is shared amongst all of these users. And now the question comes, hey Jan, how can we create such an application? What's the architecture behind this application? Well, let's quickly again look at the core feature set. We have entities, and then we have users. Users are members of these entities. And then we have articles and comments. So to create such a structure, we have to look at multi-tenant architecture. So we have one key concept, which is the tenant. And a tenant essentially is just an entity. What's an entity? It's pretty much anything and everything. You are an entity, I'm an entity, your friend is an entity, but Amazon is also an entity. And these entities access shared resources. So right here I have a little diagram. We have 3 tenants, 3 customers in this case. This is you, then this is me, and this is Amazon. Right here I display the tenants as singular users, but this is of course not right. At the end of the day, Amazon is an organization with multiple employees, but when we look at multi-tenancy, we don't really look at the individual user. Instead, we look at the tenant itself, and that's why we right here display the tenant as an individual user. So now we have 3 tenants, and these tenants all have access to the same application and to the same database. This means we share resources between all tenants. This means we have pretty much one centralized point for our application, but all of the data is separated and isolated. If this confuses you, don't worry. Let's take an analogy of a bank. A bank is a centralized institution. You as a customer are a tenant. You deposit money. this money is stored in the centralized institution, but the money is isolated and separated, because if a new customer comes to the bank, this customer does not have access to your bank account. Now here's one thing which you should know. There are a lot of ways to create multi-tenant architecture, so you could also have one database per tenant, which also has its own pros and cons, but the most common architecture is to just have one application and then also one database, and then you isolate all of the data using the organization, or in other words, tenant ID. How do we now fetch data? I just said, hey, we pretty much separate the data using the organization ID. What do I mean by that? Well, when we retrieve data, let's first of all look at an example of how we retrieve data. In a non-multi-tenant architecture, each user has their own account. This means there's no concept of an organization. I'm my own organization, which also means when I fetch data, I fetch the data based on my user ID. Inside of here, if I would fetch data based on my user ID, I would only get blog articles which have been created by me. In a multi-tenant architecture, the user is not really a key concept anymore. We pretty much forget the user. Instead, we look at the organization. This means in a multi-tenant environment, we fetch data using a tenant-specific identifier. So either an organization ID or tenant ID or entity ID. It does not matter how you call it. You just have to have some sort of tenant-specific identifier. So this means in this example, we fetch blog articles using the ID of Google. If I switch to the Amazon organization, then I now fetch blog articles which have the org ID of Amazon. And that's already it. As you see, it's relatively simple. And let's also summarize everything again in one sentence. So in a multi-tenant architecture, we have tenants. Tenants are customers. These tenants can either be individual users or organizations like Amazon and Google, which have employees. All of the tenants share the same single application instance with a single database. Data is differentiated and isolated in this database. When you want to retrieve your data, you use a tenant-specific identifier, in this case the organization ID. And voila, that's it. This is multi-tenant architecture. And since we now understand what multi-tenant architecture is, I think we can continue by actually creating our entity relationship diagram, or in short, ERD. So for our entity relationship diagram, I will use Eraser. So I can click on this plus icon. I want to create a diagram as code, and I want to create an entity relationship diagram. So as you see, we already have a few demo fields right here, chat, workspaces, and stuff like that. But we want to start off fresh, so let's delete everything. And now the question comes, what do we do inside of here? Well, with an entity relationship diagram, we can visualize our data models, or in other words, our whole database structure. This means inside of here, we want to display all of our database tables and then the relationships between these tables. This will help you understand multi-tenancy even further, and it will also help you visualize everything. So first of all, with what tables do we want to start? Well, in my document, I already defined the core feature set. We have entities, this means organizations. We have users, which are members of these organizations. We have articles and comments. And we want to now pretty much convert these fields into actual database tables. So let's start with our organization. What you want to do is give this field a name, and then let's use array brackets, and I can add an icon of user and a color of blue. Then let's open this, and inside of here we can now define our fields, or in other words, our columns. So first of all, our organization will have an ID of type string. This could also be int, I don't really care. And then we also have a name of type string. And that's already it. This is our first table, the organization table. Let's then continue. The next table is our user table. So let's again say user. Then we want to use these array symbols. For the icon, this will be user. Then we can also add a color, and this will be green. And then I can again open this model. Inside of here, we again have an ID. This will be of type string. Then we will have an email of type string. And what does the user also have? A name. This will also be of type string. As you see, this is relatively easy to implement, and now we already have two tables right here. So I will create the other two tables myself, and you will also create them yourself. And once I'm finished, I will come back. So I created all of the tables. In total, we have 4 tables. Let's again quickly go through them. So we first of all have our organization. Our organization has an ID and name. Then we have our user table with an ID, email, and name. Then we have our article table with an ID, title, content, and status, and we have a comment table with an ID and message. As you see, super simple, nothing groundbreaking. Nevertheless, before we now continue and create our relationships, we have to first of all optimize a few things. So first of all, in this example, we are missing primary keys. So since we are working with a relational database, we have to also add primary keys. And primary keys are columns, fields which are unique and not null, and they serve as a reference point. This means what fields inside of here could be primary keys. Well, there's one field which is always unique and never null. This is our ID. This means let's mark our ID as a PK. Primary key. Again, this is what we will use to identify each row. And now there's one more optimization which I want to make, and that's to add created at and updated at timestamps. So as an example, if we look at the user table, you'll see I don't have any updated at or created at timestamps. This is fine. I don't need them right now. But let's imagine in a year or so, your application becomes super successful and it makes millions of dollars per month. And now you need the created at timestamp. The thing is, it's already too late to add it now. You should have done it 1 year ago. Therefore, my recommendation to you is always add them if you're not 1,000,000,000% sure that you won't need them later on in the future. I myself pretty much add them always. 99.9% of the time I have created at and updated at timestamps, even if I don't need them at the moment. Therefore, let's update our tables, and now we're finished with optimizing our database schema, and we can continue with relationships. So let's start with the most important and most essential relationship, which is the relationship between our user and our organization. So here's the thing, a user can be a part of multiple organizations, and every organization can have multiple users. What does this mean? Do we have a one-to-one relationship, a one-to-many relationship, a many-to-one relationship? No, we have a many-to-many relationship. How do we define a many-to-many relationship? Well, we use a join table. This join table will create a many-to-many relationship. Therefore, let's scroll to the top. Let's go underneath the user model. And inside of here, I will create an organization user model. I want to get an icon, user-secret, and then also a color orange. I can then open this model, and then inside of here, I want to first of all add all of my essential columns. This means the ID, which will be of type string, and a primary key. Then I want to also have a role, which will be of type string, and then also my created at and updated at timestamps. So now we have a new model. But how do we create the many-to-many relationship? Well, we want to relate to the user and to the organization, because again, this is a join table. Therefore, we need two foreign keys. First of all, the user ID, and then the organization ID, which we will add right here in the organization user table. Therefore, let's go underneath our role, and let's first of all add the user ID. This will be of type string and FK for foreign key. And then also let's say org ID, and this will be of type string. And again, this will be a foreign key. I think you all know what foreign keys are and what primary keys are. But in short, a foreign key is just a field, a column that creates a relationship between two tables. In this case, the foreign key references the primary key, and the primary key is our ID. Therefore, we have the user ID and organization ID. They reference the primary keys. So now we have created our foreign keys, but they don't create a relation. They only create fields. So to create a relationship in Eraser, you can click on syntax help. The less than sign creates a one-to-many relationship. The bigger than sign creates a many-to-one relationship. The dash creates a one-to-one relationship, and this smaller than and bigger than sign create a many-to-many relationship. But since we use a join table, we won't need this many-to-many relationship type. So let's again close this and let's continue. So as mentioned, since we created our foreign keys, we want to create a one-to-many relationship. This means we want to create a one-to-many relationship between the user and the organization user, and then the organization and the organization user. And using these two one-to-many relationships, we will create this join table, which will result in a many-to-many relationship. So let's go underneath the comment. Then we want to first of all get our user.id .id. This is our primary key. And since we want to create a one-to-many relationship, let's use the less than sign, and we want to reference the organization user.userid. This is the foreign key. And if you look at the canvas, you'll see right here that we have our relationship. Our user references or relates to the organization user. Let's now continue. We want to now also create a relationship between the organization user and the organization table. Therefore, let's get the organization.id, then let's get the less than sign, so one to many, and we want to again get our organization user.org ID. This is the foreign key. So now we created this many-to-many relationship because our organization user is a joined table. Let's continue with the next relationship, and this will be between our organization and article. So here's the thing. One organization can have multiple or many articles. Each article has to be related to one organization. It has to be unique. Therefore, we have a one-to-many relationship. One organization can have many articles. So let's again get our organization.id, the primary key. Let's use the less than sign, and we want to reference our article.org ID. Here's the thing. We don't have an org ID, and that's because we have to create the foreign key inside of the article table. So in the article table, let's get the org ID, and then this will be of type string and then foreign key. Let's again scroll to the bottom, and now I can reference the org ID. So we created a one-to-many relationship between the organization and the article. Let's also create a relationship between the user and the article, because our user can create articles, as you know. And again, what relationship do we have? Well, one user can create many articles. Each article is related to one organization and one user. Therefore, let's get our user.id. Let's again use the less than sign for the one-to-many relationship, and we want to reference our article.userid. As you see, we don't have this field, so let's go to our article. Let's create a user ID. This will be of type string, FK, foreign key. And now we can reference our user ID, and now we created the one-to-many relationship. Nice. Let's continue. What's the next relationship? Well, we have our article and we have our comments. The thing is, one article can have many comments, but each comment has to be related to one article. Therefore, we again have a one-to-many relationship. Let's get our article.id. This is our primary key. Let's get the less than sign, and we want to reference or we want to relate to the comment.articleID. As you know, we don't have this foreign key, so let's go to our comment model or table, and then inside of here, we can get our article ID. This will be of type string, FK. So we are also finished with this relationship, and there are two more relations which I want to create. And this is first of all the relationship between the user and the comment, because again, a user can create many comments, but each comment can only relate to one article and one user. Therefore, let's get our user.id, let's get the less than sign, and I want to reference the comment.author ID. As you know, we don't have the author ID, so let's go to the comment model, let's create the author ID, which will be of type string, FK. Let's create one more relationship, and this will be the relationship between the organization table and the comment table. So let's get our organization.id, our primary key, and one organization can have many comments. Therefore, we want to use the less than sign, and we want to reference the comment.org ID. And again, this foreign key does not exist, so in the comment table, I will add the org ID. This will be of type string, FK. And since we are now finally finished with our entity relationship diagram, we can continue by actually creating our application. So I already created the initial starting point, which means I currently don't have authentication or organizations or anything like that set up. Let's quickly analyze what I have already created for you guys. First of all, we have the homepage. This is a public route, which means anybody can view this route. Then we have an articles route. This is a private route, which means only authenticated users are able to view this route and the content in this route. Then we have a creation route, and this is also a private route, but only admins should be able to create a blog article. So what do we want to implement? Well, we want to implement authentication organizations, and then roles and permissions. But let's also quickly look at the code to understand everything a bit better. So we first of all have right here the index page. As you see, nothing groundbreaking, just a bit of Tailwind CSS magic. Then we have our articles route, and in the articles route I fetch my data. So right here, constant data equals to await get articles. Get articles is a very simple function where I just use Prisma to find many articles where the organization ID matches the organization ID which I provide. Currently, we don't have any organization ID, which means this is just a dummy value. Then let's continue. What else do we have? We have right here the creation route. This is also a very simple route. I already implemented React hook form for client-side validation. In the return statement, I have a card, then I have my form, and then in the form, I have all of my inputs. For the form, I have an onSubmit handler, which calls this onSubmit function. The onSubmit function calls the create article server action, and if I open the server action, you will see this is also a relatively simple function. First of all, I implemented server-side validation, and then I just create a mutation using Prisma. I pass all of the values, and then also for the organization ID and user ID, I just pass again dummy values because currently we don't have an org ID and also no user ID. So let's again close this. Let's also quickly open our navbar. So in the navbar, I have currently a constant user, which is false. We don't really have a user. Then inside of here, I render my title or my H1, my logo in this case, then my links, and then we have a little ternary where I check if we have a valid user session. So currently we don't have a valid user session, which means we render these two buttons, login and register. If I again go back, you will see these buttons right here on the top. If I set the constant user boolean to true, you will see that we will have a team switcher. So as you see right here, this is the team switcher or the organization switcher, call it however you want to. And as you see currently, there are two teams. If we also again go back to the code, you will see inside of here, the team switcher accepts a teams array, and in the teams array I just provide an object with a name and an organization code. We can also open the team switcher if you want to. This is again very simple code, just a drop down menu with a drop down trigger and then drop down menu content. To be honest with you, I just copied the code from shared CN UI. If you want to have the same starting point, then just head over to my GitHub repo and then you can download this code example. And let's also quickly look at our Prisma schema, and inside of here we have two models, an article model and a comment model. The article model has a one-to-many relationship with the comment model, and now you might ask me, hey Jan, where's the user model, where's the organization model, the user organization model? Well, we don't need these models, and that's because we will use Kind to implement auth. Kind is my favorite auth solution, but they also sponsor this video. Nevertheless, this video is also compatible with any other auth solution. But let me give you a quick overview of Kind. So Kind helps you implement authentication, which means passwordless auth, password auth, SSO, social login, MFA, but also they help you with authorization, meaning roles and permissions. And soon they will offer billing. I already have access to billing, and since you now know what Kind is, I think we can get started by implementing Kind. So if you want to get started, click on the first link in the YouTube description, and now let's sign in. Once signed in, we want to create a new business with a business name, Kind domain, number of employees and region. As you see, my business has been created, so let me open it. Here we have a little onboarding section, so I want to use Kind with my existing code base. I want to use Kind in my Next.js project, and then I want to allow my users to sign in with email, Google, and let's say GitHub. We are almost finished. The last step is to connect our Next.js code base. So let's click on connect, and the first step is to install the SDK. So let's open the terminal and let's install it inside of here. The next step is to copy these environment variables and to paste them. These environment variables store, for example, the client ID, client secret, issue URL, but also the post logout redirect URL and the post login redirect URL. So after the user successfully logs in, I want to redirect the user to articles. The next step is to implement the API endpoint. This will help kind to authenticate you, to log out, to, I guess, implement roles and permissions and stuff like that. So let's copy the route structure. Then here's a little trick. Instead of creating a brand new folder, you can click on create new file, and then you can just paste the route structure inside of here, and this will generate the folder structure for you automatically. Then we can paste the content inside of here, and let's continue with the next step. And the last step is to set up the kind of provider, and this will give us access to the kind of data in our application, and it will also ensure that all of the tokens are refreshed when needed. Then I can copy this code and then paste it in this file. I created the auth provider file in my components folder. Let's now open our layout file, and we want to wrap everything in this auth provider. And now we are already finished with setting up kind. The next step is to allow the user to sign in and sign out. So let's open our navbar, and inside of here we have our two buttons. But instead of using these buttons, we can use the login link and register link components. For that, we can go back to the quick start guide, and let's copy the import statement. I can paste it on top, and again, if I scroll to the bottom, instead of using the button, let me use the login link, and then also right here the register link. The thing is, these two components are headless, so let me use a class name, and I will use the button variants function to style this component like a shared CN button. If I again go back, you'll see that I still render my logout button and my team switcher. But the thing is, I'm not signed in. What's the problem? Well, currently my ternary uses this user constant, but the user is just a fake boolean which says that the user is logged in. This is not true. This means let's instead fetch the actual user session. For that, let's create a new constant. Let's destructure it, and this will be equal to getKindServerSession. GetKindServerSession is a hook which exposes functions which run on the server side. So let's get the getUser function, and let's fetch the user. So constant user equals to await getUser. Our ternary should still work, which means if I again go back, we now render the login and register buttons. If I click on register, I should get redirected to the kind authentication page, and that's exactly what happened. And I can register either with Google, GitHub, or with my email. Here's one important thing which I forgot to mention, and that's that you should create the API folder in the app folder. And now let's register with GitHub. As you see, I got redirected back to my articles page. This means our environment variable with the post login redirect URL worked, and now we have our team switcher. But currently this logout button does not work. So let's again go back. So right here where we import our register link and login link components, we can get the logout link component, and then instead of rendering a button for logout, we can render the logout link with a class name of button variants. So if I click on logout, we should get logged out. Yoo-hoo! Success, guys! Let's now continue with organizations. So let's go back to the kind dashboard, and then in the sidebar, you will find the organizations tab or section. Inside of here, we have one organization, and that's the default organization. So whenever a user signs up, this user will be a member of the default organization as a default. Who would have thought? So here's the thing, because this is a relatively short video, we will implement organizations right in the dashboard. In a production environment, you would not create organizations in the dashboard. Instead, the user should create the organizations himself. Therefore, you can go to the kind docs, and then inside of here, you'll find this isCreateOrg parameter. So to initiate the organization self signup flow, pass the isCreateOrg parameter in the auth URL when redirecting to kind. So if you want to allow the users to pretty much create new organizations when signing up, then pass this URL. But for this video, we will create organizations manually. So let's create a new organization. This will be the Amazon organization. And then for the handle, this will be Amazon. Let's save this, and let's create one more organization. This will be the Google organization, and for the handle, this will be lowercase Google. So now we have in total 3 organizations, and currently if I go back to the users, we have 1 user, that's me, and I as a user am a member of the default organization, but we can update this. Let's click on this user, Jan, then let's scroll to the bottom, and inside of here you will find this organizations section. Let's edit the organizations, and I want to say, hey, Jan will be a member of the Amazon and Google organization, and let's remove the default organization. I don't need that, so I'm now a member of 2 organizations. Let's save this, let's save everything, and let's go back. Inside of here, I want to again log in. And here's the interesting thing. Instead of getting redirected back to my application, I got redirected to this kind page, and I have to select the organization which I want to sign into. I want to sign into the Google organization, so let's continue. And now I should get redirected back to my index page or to my articles page. And that's exactly what happened. But our team switcher still does not show the actual live data. That's not what I want. So let's again go back. And then right here where I the structure get user, so in the navbar, I can get the get organization function and the get user organizations function. The get user function returns the organization where I'm currently signed into actively, and the get user organizations function returns an array with all of the organizations where I'm a member of. And now we can also await these functions. So let's create a constant organization. This will be equal to await get organization and then constant user organizations, and this will be equal to await get user organizations. Let's console log both values, so the user organizations and the organization itself. And if I open my terminal, you'll now see 2 console logs. We first of all have our user organizations. This is an array with 2 organizations because I'm a member of the Google and Amazon organization, and I'm currently signed into the Google organization. But we currently have one problem. The organization name is undefined. That's not quite what I want. So let's change that. Let's go back to the kind dashboard. Let's go to the home page. Let's scroll to the bottom. Here we have our application. I can click on view details, and then in the sidebar, I can click on tokens, and I want to first of all edit the access token. So let's click on customize, and I want to add a new claim. So I want to get the organization name. So let's click on true, or let's click on the selector. And then for the roles, let's also set this to true. Let's save this. And then I can also customize my ID token. And I want to get my organizations as an array. So let's select this. Let's save it. And let's save everything globally. If I again go back, log out and again log in, I will right now just select the Amazon organization, and if I go back and open the terminal, you'll see, we now have the organization code and we also get the organization name. Nice. So we can use these values now for our team switcher. So if I scroll to the bottom, the team switcher wants to get the array of all of the teams I'm a part of, but it also wants to get the active organization. So for the active organization, we can get our organization.org name, and then for the organization code we can get our organization.organization code. Again, if you open your terminal, you will find the values inside of here. We have our org code and our org name. Then for our teams array, we can just map over our user organizations, so user organizations.orgs.map, and then I pass my name and my org code. So if I again go back and do a hard refresh, you'll see, Amazon. Interesting. If I click on the team switcher, I see my 2 organizations. Again, teams, organizations, it does not matter how you call them. Let's select the Google organization. Nothing happened. What's the problem? Well, we have to tell kind that we want to switch the organization. Therefore, I want to open my team switcher, and then in the team switcher, we have this drop-down menu item. So we map over our teams, and then we render the drop-down menu item. In here, I want to now also render my login link. So let's pass the asChild property for the drop-down menu item, and then we can wrap everything in the login link component. Please make sure that you import the login link component from kindoss/kind-of-next.js/components. And then for the login link, I want to pass one key property, and this is the org code. And this will be equal to our team.org code. And voila, we should be finished. Let's again go back. Let's open our organization switcher. And if I click on Google, I should get signed in into the Google organization. And that's exactly what happened. Let's again switch into the Amazon organization. As you see, the active organization is Amazon. And if I do a hard refresh, everything stays persisted. Nice. And let's also finish off our creation route because, as mentioned, only users with the role admin should be able to create a brand new blog article. So let's again go back to the kind dashboard. Let's scroll to the bottom, and then right here we have our roles. I can create a brand new role, and this will be the admin role. So as you see, I have to provide a name, a little description, and then a key, and this is what I will reference in my code. Therefore, this is just a lowercase admin. Let's save this. Then we can also create a brand new permission. Let's click on add permission, and this will be there to create a new blog article. As you see, I added a name, description, and then for the key, this is again what we will reference in our actual code. Therefore, I said right here, create : article. Let's save this. Let's again go back to our roles, and then I want to edit my admin role, and I want to select the permission create article. This means the admin role can create a brand new article. Let's go back to the homepage. Let's go to our users, and then for Jan, for myself, I want to now add this role. So let's select admin and let's save this. And as you see, I'm also only an admin for the Amazon organization. If I switch to the Google organization, I'm not an admin anymore. So let's go back. I will again log out and log in. I will select the Amazon organization, and then let's open our actions file. Because in the actions file, I want to now first of all check that the user is authenticated and also that the user has the correct role. So let's create a constant, let's destructured, and this will be equal to get kind server session. Then the get kind server session hook exposes the get user function, which means we can now fetch our user. So I will create a constant user, which will be equal to await get user. Since we now get our user, we can do a little if check, and I will say, hey, if we don't have an user, then let's redirect the user, and I want to redirect the user to /API/auth/register. So we now check that the user has a valid session. Let's also check that the user has the right permission. So we can use the get permission function. Let's also fetch the permission. So constant permission equals to await get permission. And as an argument, we have to provide the key of the actual permission, and this was create : article. We can console log our permission, so let's again go back to our creation route, and I will just provide some dummy data, and let's click on submit. And if I again go back and open my terminal, you will see inside of here, permission organization code is granted true. Nice. And let's again create an if check, and we will say, hey, if there's no permission.is granted, then let's again open this and let's redirect the user to the index page. Then for our mutation, we can now update our organization ID and user ID with actual live data. So for the org ID, I can pass my permission.org code, and for the user ID, I will pass my user.id. And let's test it out. So let's again go back. Right here, I already provided some data, and if I click on submit, I should get redirected to my articles, but it says no articles found. What's the problem? Well, again, if I open my articles route, you'll see that I have this await get articles function. And if I open the get articles function, I currently fetch my blog articles using an organization ID, which is just a dummy value, which means I don't get anything. This means in the get articles function, we can again first of all check if the user has a valid session. So let me just copy the code example from our actions file. Let's paste it inside of here. I want to get the get user function. Let's import the get kind server session hook, and right here we check, hey, if we don't have a valid user session, then let's redirect the user to register. So now we know that the user has a valid session, but we want to also get the organization. So let's get the get organization function. We have to again await this function, and then for the org ID, I can just pass my organization.org code. Let's save this, let's go back, and voila, as you see, we have one blog article, and that's because the Amazon organization has only one blog article. If I switch the organization and go to the Google organization, you'll see no articles found. Sorry. Okay, my friends, we are now finished with this video. We covered multi-tenancy in 40 minutes. You should now know everything there is about multi-tenancy, how it works, and of course, how to implement it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It would mean so much to me and my heart. Thank you, Kind, for making this video possible. Thanks for the cool t-shirt. And now, enjoy your day and see you in the next video. Bye bye. Oh, by the way, next week, new long-form video. You heard it here first. And then end of June, another long-form video. Bye bye. Oh, and it will be a B2B SaaS, the video in June. Okay, bye.